Is the leader of the most powerful military on earth saying he doesn't have a strategy in the Middle East and he's waiting on the Iraqi military? Can you imagine? I want you to think about what he just said. We know that he got to Bavaria and drank a beer at 11 in the morning local time. We know that he was having a good time. Maybe he was drunk when he said this. He spoke off the cuff and said, we don't have a complete strategy. What does that strike you as? Is that, obviously, it's not a leadership statement. It's a delusion. This is a delusional man. Why would he tell the Air Force not to fire rockets at the enemy itself unless he was on their side? This doesn't make sense to me. I don't think it's madness. I think there's something worse going on here. What do you think?
I think that everything he says is a manipulation. There's not a sincere word that comes out of his mouth, and they're not his words. I think all the words, all the decisions he makes are predetermined by the same group that put him there, channeled through Valerie Jarrett as the conduit. And this is your brief today, like an actor given his lines. I think that's what Obama says. But he probably still thinks he's the one in control. But he is being controlled. He's a puppet.
So he's sort of in your mind, the Manchurian candidate. Is that what you're saying?
I'm absolutely saying that. And nobody, you're the only one that I've ever heard that actually it touches on that and explores who is behind this guy. Nobody else gets behind or even wants to go behind the curtain. They show no interest. All the articles, even on the right and right publications, just concentrate on Obama and Obama and Obama. He's incompetent. He's a bumbler. You're one of the very, very few, and I think you were the original one, who actually came out and said, I don't think so. I think he's accomplishing everything that he's setting out to do, and he's making it look like he's just mucking through.
Yes, absolutely. That's how I see it. That's how I've seen it for a very long time right now. Can I ask you, I'm just curious listening to your voice because I have the ability to put things together. What do you do professionally, if you can tell us?
I retired as a mechanical engineer.
So you know how things work. You know how things work. In other words, how parts go together.
It has to work. I am only interested in what works and what's real. Everything else is aesthetic. It's
I love engineers. They're very, very different people from the type I know. Look, this was a great conversation, a great spin-off from the point of origin of creativity and psychosis sharing a genetic source. And I segued it to Obama, who I think is, yes, by design, doing everything he was told to do before he was handpicked by the shadowy group that picked him, and is right now shadowy picking the next president of the United States. They've already got that one picked. It's all lined up. We can pretty much tell you who the shadowy group is. You don't have to be a genius to put those people together. We know that one of them is George Soros, who is going to spend, he said, $9 million to sue states that have voting rights acts, meaning that prevent illegal aliens from voting, prevent people from double and triple voting, preventing people who shouldn't vote from voting. George Soros, one of the most evil men in the history of America, is spending $9 million to override states' rights. My friend, I'm glad that we talked, and I'm giving you a novel written for you called Countdown to Mecca, a special gift for your retirement and for Father's Day. I'll be right back.
Join the Savage Nation. Call now, 855-400-SAVAGE, 855-400-7282. Savage.
My Savage Nation is sponsored by SwissAmerica.com, the only company I trust to protect my wealth with gold and silver. Call 800-BUYCOIN. The word that's used an awful lot, used as a noun, an adjective, used in medicine. Oh, he's insane. Oh, you're insane. But it's used almost in a fun way today, but true insanity is nothing to be laughed at. It's a horrible place to be, as you know, if you've been sick or if you've had people in your family who are mentally ill. It's not a laughing matter. And so it's a great topic for our times because I think that the whole society is insane. Personally, I sit here and I watch a mentally ill society. The entire society is insane. Do I have to say Bruce Jenner again? They are lauding this man like he is a hero. Someone sent me a picture over the weekend. I thought it was going up on my website. It's from a military friend. And it shows 4 Iraqi vets, one of them covered in blood after a firefight. And they're holding this guy up. They're just dirty and full of blood with their weapons hanging from their shoulders. And it said, we're on our way to celebrate Bruce Jenner's heroism. Yeah, I mean, there's a difference between a real hero and this insanity that we're talking about, promulgated by the psychosis called liberalism. Liberalism is a mental disorder. Make no mistake about it. I don't care how prevalent it is. I don't care how popular it is. I don't care how lauded it is. I don't care whether you're a liberal. Liberalism, at the end of the day, you'll find out, as sure as I'm sitting here, is a mental disorder. You'll come to understand it. You will come to understand it. And it's worth talking about because the country is dying in front of our eyes. So I'd rather go back to the topic in a more generic way of mental schizophrenia, I guess, and psychosis, creativity and psychosis, rather, because schizophrenia and psychosis are not one and the same, by the way. But how many people ape being nuts, wild, far out, crazy, who are not that creative, but they ape it? You know, like the artist type who has a gallery opening. We've seen it in popular culture and movies, where the artist will put on a bizarre outfit or act, crazy during the opening in order to make the buyers think that they're more creative than they are. Right? You know what I'm saying? Like put on the act. Oh, she's a crazy artist. Well, okay, that's one way to go about selling your stuff, but there's another way, which is to not even be at the opening and let your agents, let your crazy agents sell the paintings, for example. Or show up in a Brooks Brothers suit and be a total normopath and act like a royal. Curtsy. You don't have to drink and be stupid in order to sell a painting. Let the art sell itself. But everything is an act. You take a look at the talentless Lady Gaga. Talentless, ugly woman, but she's a great performer.
Join the Savage Nation. Call now, 855-400-SAVAGE, 855-400-7282. Savage.
All right, turn off the schmaltz. I don't know where to take the show right now. We're talking about mood disorders and creativity. I don't want to go into the political, but it certainly affects our politicians. I will stand by my allegation that a goodly percentage of our so-called leaders are insane. They're on medication as sure as I'm sitting. It's what explains their behavior. It explains their lack of afference. It explains their unwillingness to know what they're doing, to accept that they're violating the will of the people. I've also called for drug testing all members of Congress on a monthly basis. If you work for a corporation, you have to pee in a cup. It's true. It's a fact. Well, I would think that people who have access to our most dear security interests should pee in a cup so that we, the people, can see which one of them are unfit at any speed. And that includes the president. I think a president should be forced to take a drug test once a month. How do you like that? Now, of course, if we did that, there'd be no one running for office, I suppose. So we're going to have to live with these nuts for a long time. So talking about mood disorders in writers, poets, and artists is another story. And we know the famous story of Ernest Hemingway, one of my early heroes, who I love. I mean, I revered this guy. This guy was Zeus to me. And when I read in the news that he shot his brains out with a shotgun after electroconvulsive treatment or shock therapy, I blame the shock therapy, not him. I blame the Mayo Clinic to this day for killing Hemingway, because I studied that suicide very carefully. You know what talking about Hemingway for a minute. Now, first of all, his father shot himself. Did you know that? I don't know if you know this. That's a sad truth that seems to run in families. Suicide tends to run in families. It's a terrible thing to say, but unfortunately, there are genetic, links here. So Hemingway is acting bizarre. He was a monstrous alcoholic. It severely affected his moods and emotions. I mean, the man drank around the clock. And it certainly affected his feelings of depression. The first thing a person who has such problems should do is give up alcohol immediately. Totally. Central nervous system depressant. And alcoholism? Are you kidding me? Forget about alcohol. It's a terrible drug for people who are like that. But nevertheless, get back to electroconvulsive therapy, because it's having a comeback right now. Shock therapy, a nightmare. So Hemingway's having these problems. The quacks talk him into going to the Mayo Clinic, which I call the mayonnaise clinic, because their medicine is like that of mayonnaise. It's mayonnaise and white bread as far as I'm concerned. It's not a whole wheat treatment. They sent him to the Mayo Clinic. They put him. They give him electroconvulsive therapy. He loses the ability to think. He can't create. He can't think. His mind is shot. He walks out of the clinic on the way to the tarmac to the twin turbo plane that was going to take him back to Ketchum, Idaho, and he tried to walk into the propeller of the plane, and people stopped him. Well, shortly thereafter, he got home and did what he did, shot his brains out. I think it's because he couldn't use his mind anymore, and he was useless. He didn't want to live anymore. I mean, famous stories like that lead you to ask questions about how could we have saved such a person. Or the famous story of Virginia Woolf, who drowned herself when she felt a depressive episode coming on and she couldn't control it. Or composer Robert Schumann, who died in a mental institution. We even know about Michelangelo was, I believe, mentally off, right? And there have been studies done on this issue. And another study was done with 1 million people conducted at the Karolinska Institute in Sweden. And, of course, they found a number of correlations between creative occupations and mental illnesses. For example, not so surprisingly, writers had a higher risk of anxiety and bipolar disorders, schizophrenia, unipolar depression, and substance abuse. And were almost twice as likely as the general population to kill themselves. Dancers and photographers were also more likely to have bipolar disorder. So knowing that is one thing, but helping people is another, especially if you are suffering. You have a close relative with such a disorder. And you have to understand that there are many ways to control these illnesses other than drugs. And I think people are becoming aware of those other methods, whether they be exercise or yoga, which is a form of exercise and meditation. And certainly vitamin therapy should not be ignored, especially if you're educated and can research some of this on your own. And you'll have people who tell you they couldn't believe the results of taking massive doses of niacin on their formerly uncontrollable emotions. They couldn't believe it. Or some people have reported remarkable changes in their view of the world by taking magnesium in the newer forms. You read this in the literature now. So things are emerging in this area that are worth looking at. And the mood creativity research should not exclude these outside influences because, see, here's the thing. I think a lot of creative people feel that if they kill those edgy moods, they're going to kill their creativity. The opposite may be true. I study this to a great extent. I don't mean as a psychiatrist. I mean as an interested outside observer who's trained in science. And what I came to conclude is that the greatest artists were the hardest workers. And the greatest artists were the most disciplined. And the greatest artists were the least nuts, as far as I can tell. In other words, yeah, they could have these emotions, they could have these feelings, but as you, the average person who's not that creative, let's say, you also, you don't have you're not in the human condition? Of course you have impulses. Or as a rabbi once said to me, he said, do you think I'm made of stone? In other words, he has emotions and feelings, but he suppresses them. And that leads us to the whole issue of repression and suppression. A little known thing called repression and suppression of urges. Something that's anathema to modern America. In the Spock age, if it feels good, do it. Johnny smearing the walls with feces, being told he's Picasso, etc. I think there may be a place in our society for repressing emotions and suppressing feelings. That's my feeling on this issue. I think maybe we should move on with a few more calls, and we'll take them. KBET Radio, line 3, you're up. Go ahead, make your point. You're on the Savage Nation.
Yes. I believe everybody ought to be tested for mental health. I believe everybody's insane or mad. As in Alice in Wonderland, everybody's mad in Wonderland. And everybody needs to be tested, I feel, to find out if they're criminally insane, if they're dangerous, or if they're harmless. And I believe that's important. My foundation is the Song of Moses, chapter 32, Deuteronomy. I believe that is just how I feel about it, Michael.
Well, wait, let me see if I can back this up. Who's going to do the testing and who's going to establish the norm of what insanity is?
That's a good question.
Are you going to let the government do it? You're going to let the nuts who run this government determine who's sane?
Michael, I believe there are people. Everyone's